welcome to the program from the 33rd team, the great NFL writer Jason Colt. Could you deduce anything from the preseason about how any of these teams or players are going to perform?
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it just seemed like there was no effort whatsoever to even disguise the fact that these weren't even as intense as some of the practices as the players and the coaches often allude to.
I think it is incredibly difficult to try and figure out.
Let's go to eat a damn snack.
We have the professor with us, Mike Lubie, of course, has stated his position on last night's Dolphin game, angry with all of these social media posts about Brian Flores, which, Professor, I mean, looming very large right now is the fact that you had what appeared to be or sounded like just an absurd conspiracy
we get a little
theory.
like Lubie's getting angry. Can
Yeah.
we get angry that Stephen Ross and the Dolphins let Ryan fucking Fitzpatrick into the building to spread his lucky charms magic?
Oh my God,
And
you're right.
First fucking time they do it, Tua goes down with a concussion, probably a career ender. Like, how do you let that piece of shit into the fucking building?
Good for you, Ken. I didn't even think about that.
The
Yeah.
fucking cops arrest Tyreek Hill, but you let Ryan Fitzpatrick run around the city. Do your fucking job, Miami Dade, please. The minute that fucking Lucky Charms motherfucker showed up in the city, he should have been thrown in fucking prison. Like, the man spent 2 years along with Flores trying to kill Tua. And the first time he shows up, what happens?
The time. Wake up with Defo, joined by Lubie. Welcome to the Defo Show.
Peel yourself off to my Monday. Gets underway here on the Defo Show. Jeff DeForest and a very, it's interesting because at this point, resignation, I guess, would be the way to describe where Mike Lubitz is when it comes to, it's sunshine when she's gone, man. The Sunshine State. Side of the University of Miami making a meteoric rise in the rankings. It could be as high as what? Certainly inside the top 10. Did the new rankings come out already? Because I think Texas replaced Georgia as the number one team in some rankings.
Texas should be number one. Miami's like 8, I think. It's about right.
Okay, 8 so far. I mean, have they played anybody? If you look at what the Gators are doing, then you would have to say, I don't know that would be considered a cupcake game. It still was a name school on the road, but nonetheless.
No, they're a disaster.
Ball State wasn't exactly a challenge. FAMU wasn't exactly a challenge. So we don't know. It looks good. Not the most imaginative running game by Mario Cristobal. It's supposed to be a guy that emphasizes the run, these runs up the middle off the Statue of Liberty. Not exactly the kind of stuff that Mike McDaniel dreams about at night after he drops an acid tab. But passing game with Cam Ward looked pretty good. So now the college is interesting. The pros yesterday, and cancel my audition to Naked and Afraid, Libby. There's no way I could survive out in the wilderness there with mosquitoes attacking me and snakes and spiders and all the other stuff that goes on there. Just maybe carrying a machete and some little sack with no shoes, no clothes on, rain coming, thunder, lightning, lions are lurking about. No way I could survive out there for even 2 seconds when I couldn't make it 2 weeks.
No, what did you end up
in the
doing?
Survivor Pool. Well, I mean, here's what happened. On the show, you talked me into it.
I told you what to do.
Which was good. I mean, and we were going to hedge off the Ravens and go to the Texans, right?
Yeah.
So I have a conversation with a friend of mine there, Henry from No Filter.
Ravens.
He's telling me.
Again, survivor pools are not by the spread, right? Survivor pools are straight
up win. All you got to do is win the game. Ravens up 10 points in the fourth quarter. Not exactly playing great. I did tune into the red zone since the Dolphins weren't playing, and I'm watching all of this action on the red zone, which is frantic, Lubie. I don't usually do that.
Stresses me out.
Oh, my God. How can you possibly keep pace? And every time they show a Raiders highlight, the Raiders are either scoring or Lamar Jackson is getting plastered like 10 yards deep in the pocket. So you could see that game wasn't trending well. And yet you still have a touchdown lead late in the fourth quarter, and only to see that evaporate and eventually lose on a game-winning field goal with seconds to go, about a minute to go in the game. I guess the Ravens had one last shot with 30 seconds to tie it up. They couldn't make the play, and eliminated in the Circa pool. 2,300. That was the number one choice, the Ravens. 2,300 went out. And this was after we didn't follow our own advice from the week before, which is stay away. See, you wouldn't think that would be in play 2 weeks in a row, would you? Where you dodged a big spread game, which the Patriots were involved in their upset victory in week number 1 in the game that involved the biggest point spread. So you're thinking that probably won't happen. But in gambling, do you always take the path of least resistance, Lubie? That's a good question. And who could figure this Sunday and week 2 in the NFL, there's still one game to go with the Eagles tonight, taking on the Falcons. But who could figure it? 7 underdogs won straight up on Sunday. They went 7-7 straight up and 8-5-1 against the spread. So, I mean, not overwhelming, but if you were playing the dogs, Mark Lawrence, of course, had a good week as he was 3-1 on the show. The professor actually on college football was 3-2 giving out picks because he threw in at the last second when he saw a line change in the Florida State game and realized that extra half a point was going to be more than enough to convince him that Florida State was not going to prevail, certainly versus the point spread. And, wow, very dull effort all the way around by Florida State in front of the home fans. So that was the El Crusheroo. The Dolphins not playing kind of made it easy, didn't it, Lubie? It had it didn't seem like a century ago that they played, and this whole Tua story broke. It was one of those deals where totally pleasant. I mean, I couldn't believe no emotional investment whatsoever in the Sunday games. So that worked out well for us. By the way, Brett Tesler going to join us 8:15, Lubie. So we'll take a short break before we bring him on there at 8:15. And Chris Perkins is going to talk some football with us at 8:30 today on the show. All right. So what did you gather from? I mean, I guess one of the big surprises, you didn't know if the New Orleans Saints were for real. And certainly for survivor pool purposes, the more practical move would have been pick against the Panthers every week. Problem is, I still had the feeling that Brandon Staley was coaching the Chargers. You have to figure what are they already vastly improved because Harbaugh's there, or are the Panthers just so bad that you pick against them no matter what?
Both. It's Panthers are so bad you just pick against them. One, I mean they're already trying about a quarterback change. They drafted the guy last year, number 1, and the number 2 pick is a definitive established quarterback in this league already in Stroud, and they're already talking about moving off of Young, having the worst record in football this year. They get to keep their pick after all those trades. I guess it's protected.
He looks badly miscast, doesn't he?
It doesn't work. It's not working there. I look. I don't blame him. I think whoever is there wouldn't work. Look at Darnold. Darnold was a fucking disaster there. He doesn't look like a disaster with the goddamn Vikings. He looks like the guy we thought he was coming out of fucking USC like a decade later. But the Panthers are a mess. And then on the other side, Harbaugh's just said, screw it, and gone old school Harbaugh. Like, they're running. They're playing good defense. Herbert, for as good as everyone says he is, wasn't winning games being Herbert. So they're just having him be the fucking guy who was at Oregon with Mario Cristobal. And they're playing it very close to the vest. And when you play bad teams, that's how you win. Staley would have won a lot more games if he played like that. Staley tried to be a gunslinger kind of coach, and it was fucking stupid. So Harbaugh's not that guy. He's not conservative per se because he's an offensive-minded guy, but he's not wide open frills. He's a very old school. Look, him with Luck he had one of the best college prospects ever, and they had played 2 tight end offensive sets. Like, that's what Harbaugh does. And it works. It allows Herbert to get into the game. Their defense is vastly better than people thought it was because they have a ton of talent. But the way they were playing offense, a lot of times screwed their defense. They're running the ball and they're winning. And it's just a different team. Will they beat other good teams? I don't know. But they'll beat the bad teams, and they were going to beat the Panthers. I mean,
oh my God, how stupid do you feel? Have you ever, thought about planning your own funeral, Lubie? I really haven't put too much thought into that, although I buried myself with this. Because on the show here, we picked Houston, and we would have survived.
Yes.
And then 15 minutes later, I get to bury your bookie, and I had a conversation with the gentleman who helps me out there, Henry from No Filter. And he said his dad was in the circa pool, and then he said he was taking the Ravens because there's no way that happens 2 weeks in a row.
I mean, there is. It's what we said. The problem with those plays, the Ravens should have won 100%. But it's what we're talking about. Like, it's going to be played like it's a cinch game. The Raiders aren't bad. Like, that's the thing, is the Ravens are good, but the Ravens aren't bad. So, like, that kind of team they play good defense. They Pierce is tough. You know, they don't offense. They don't take too many chances. Like, and with the Ravens, if you can keep Lamar Jackson in the pocket, he's mortal. Like, that's just, it's not a question anymore. We're now like 8 or 9 years in the fucking league. Like, that's who he is. If he can run around, he will kill you. If you keep him in the pocket and ask him to be a pocket passer, he's
my God, he was getting crushed.
That's just what he is. So
I mean, he looked like a 10 pin in a PBA
and the
tournament.
Raiders are a team I thought could do that. And it was like, I wouldn't pick the Raiders to win, obviously. I wouldn't bet on them. But in a survivor pool where spread doesn't matter, you
had to think the Ravens weren't going to start out 0-2.
No, I didn't. But
aren't the Chiefs, are they not the luckiest team in the league? I mean, I know they're very good, but Jesus Christ, how much luck can you have? Then you had the Giants, their case with the Redskins, where Graham Gano gets hurt on the opening kickoff, pulls a hamstring. He came into the game with a groin injury. So on a meaningless return, he starts doing the old Marino thing where he flailingly does a token run after the guy that's about to score. Now, there was a flag on the play, so the kickoff didn't count anyway, and he injures a hamstring. The Giants, I believe, this may be in NFL history. I'm not sure how far back it goes. Then become, and this is an odd distinction because it's pretty hard to find these kind of circumstances, the only team to score 3 touchdowns in a game and yield no touchdowns in a game to ever lose. They lose 21-18 because they had no kicker.
Oh, Jesus.
And
I
obviously
saw that game go down to the wire, but I didn't realize that they had actually played that decent. And
they had no kicker. They didn't activate the guy that was their backup kicker.
They had 0 kicker. Oh, God.
No kicker. They had no kicker. They would have had to have Dayball go trotting out there.
Are you kidding me? They had no
kick it himself. That killed him. I mean, it cost him the ball game, essentially. Daniel Jones, I mean, he wasn't horrible in his game, but I didn't see all of it. However, that was the bottom line was, and they had a chance to take the lead it was 18-all. They could have kicked a field goal. They were in field goal range. They had to go for a 4th down instead. They didn't make that, and then Washington goes down the field, gets the game-winning field goal. They lose 21-18 without 7 field goals for the Redskins. And they lose the ball game. Holy Tony Sperano, what are we talking about? All right, we're going to come back in just a moment. We have some special guests lined up for you here on the program. Talk a little football with Brett Tessler, the agent to the Stars, going to join us in just a couple of minutes. And then Chris Perkins around 8:30. So we'll come back with Brett Tessler, the agent to the Stars, in a moment. Now that. It's 8:15.
Here, let me ask you a question. What do you look for when you go out to eat? Good food, obviously, friendly atmosphere, not too loud, but good energy, reasonable prices, and a place where you feel comfortable. All those ingredients, no pun meant there, are hard to find unless you're talking about the Texas Roadhouse. You see, they encompass all of those attributes. Really, really good food, amazing atmosphere, good for a family, good for a date, or just a night out for yourself, and prices that will make you extremely happy. Their ribs unmatched, steaks hand-cut every day. Everything, and I mean everything, is made on site, including their incredible bread. It's the one day, folks, that you can forget about low-carb diets. Trust me when I tell you, Texas Roadhouse, your restaurant, your destination when you say, where should we go and eat tonight?
From the newly renovated sports bar to the beautiful bayside views captured at the Tiki Bar, Jimmy Johnson's Big Chill has it all. Located at mile marker 104, the Big Chill also offers waterfront dining while experiencing breathtaking sunset views of the Florida Keys. It's simply the hottest spot in the Keys to cool off. That's Jimmy Johnson's Big Chill at mile marker 104 in Key Largo. For more information, call today at 305-453-9066.
Recently realized it's
the simple pleasures of this job, the way a stadium sounds when one of my players performs well on the field, the way we are meant to protect them in health and in injury. Less money, more attention, caring for them, caring for ourselves in the games, too.
The agent to the stars, the one and only Brett Tessler.
All right, welcome back to the show. Peel Yourself Off the Mat Monday. The Dolphins played on Thursday night. They laid an egg on Thursday night and had all kinds of problems in the process with Tua Tagovailoa suffering yet another concussion, his fourth recorded, including the one he had in college, 3 in the pros. And there were calls for Tua to consider retirement from a lot of people, both inside and outside the game. Apparently, he's not going to do that. I thought immediately of this man, and I actually sent him a text, call Drew, when Hill was being arrested and he was on the ground and he had the cell phone kind of rolling around on the ground there. And he's saying, call Drew. And I thought surely he was talking about Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, to come and intervene. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is what this gentleman has to deal with, although his clientele don't tend to get in as many scraps as Drew Rosenhaus's do. Drew, of course, has 150 players or some ridiculous number. But we welcome the show Brett Tessler, the agent to the stars. And you've been in your share of those things, Brett. How are you, by the way? First of all, good to have you on the program. And second of all, it turned out that was debunked. It wasn't Drew Rosenhaus he was talking about. But how are things going? Good to have you on the program, my friend.
Great to be with you guys as always. And it's been a minute, so great to be back on here. But yeah, when I watched that scene, I mean, obviously I've had clients over the years that have been involved in various scrapes with the law. And, some people do from time to time. But that situation, when he was saying call Drew, I knew immediately he was referring to the Dolphins director of security, who's a cop, Drew Brooks. So that would obviously be the more appropriate person to help diffuse that situation at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, what impact, if any, does something like that have on a team? It seemed like they shook it off. Hill had a good ball game that day, made a touchdown catch, very significant one that turned the game around and the momentum in the Dolphins' favor. They eventually pulled it out over Jacksonville. But what's your feeling? Does that have any impact on the game? Or, I mean, people are always talking about distractions in sport. I tend to discount them, but what did you think of all that?
Well, thankfully, it was against the Jaguars. And so, that put the team at 1-0. But I think what we've seen from the Jaguars yesterday, that performance against the Browns, afterwards, I think Trevor Lawrence was quoted as saying, "We suck." And I don't think any reasonable person would disagree with that statement. It's obviously not one of the toughest teams in the league, and the Dolphins started out very flat in that game, but fortunately they kind of came alive when they needed to and did what they needed to do, and ended up getting the win and going to 1-0. But then you had Thursday's game against obviously a much better Bills team, and we kind of saw the way that game went. So I don't think any distraction is really good for a team. And so, again, fortunately, that week they were able to get through it. But, we saw what happened in the last game. And it ended up being kind of a sad game to watch on many levels.
How alarming was that from any number of standpoints? So let's take it from, and there's no way to know. I mean, only Tagovailoa can decide what he wants to do. I don't know. I mean, I not being a neurologist or whatever, I would have no idea. What would be advisable for him. Seems like obviously the safe route would be to give up the game. It doesn't appear he's going to do that, but. How alarming was it from that standpoint, and then also from the way the team performed prior to Tua getting hurt, which they were being badly throttled by the Bills, who have owned them over the last several years?
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of game that, I don't know how must win you could ever say that a second week of the season game is. But, again, they figured out a way to come out on top in the first game. And, some people may not have liked the way that game looked. So this was certainly going to be the opportunity for them to prove that, no, we're for real. That was just a hiccup. We're a team that is going to be ultimately, not only making the postseason, but competing for a Super Bowl, which I think you could fairly say that's what the expectations for this team at this point are. Because when you've got the offensive weapons they do, when you've got a Waddle, when you've got a Hill, when you've added a Odell Beckham, when you've got running backs like Mostert and Achane and, you know, a quarterback who was in the Pro Bowl last year, I think just making it to the postseason or eking your way into a wild card spot probably isn't going to cut it, excuse me, and probably isn't going to be satisfactory to the fans. So, you know, it's just one of those things where I think from here you go one of two ways. Obviously, their starting quarterback went down in the game, and we'll see what happens in the coming days and weeks with that. And we'll see who ends up replacing him and how they're able to perform. But, you know, there's no doubt that if you're a fan of this team, you have to be concerned.
So let me ask you, and because look, he's fun and he's different, and I'm all for being different. I really am. But to me, the more I watch Mike McDaniel coach, the more I go, he doesn't fit. Like it just feels like when I watch their play calls, when I watch how ill prepared they are to start almost every game, like even the games they win, it feels like they start slow every game. For a team that's fast, feels a little weird. Like, what fingers, what blame, what attention do you put on the head coach when that's now 2 games in a row that they were supposed to come up and have a Super Bowl on the mind, that they just look like an average to bad team?
I understand your concern. And the thing is, McDaniel can only do so much. He's the coach.
Yep.
And so he has to tailor his offense around, or, you know, tailor his entire team around the different units, strengths, and weaknesses. And so naturally, if you have a quarterback who is accurate, who throws well-timed, you know, well-located balls, and you've got receivers who, if you can get that ball in their hands, they're capable of doing the rest. Naturally, you know, you got to develop a quick hitting style of offense. And that's exactly what this team is. And that's exactly what this team's been, because I'm not really sure with the offensive line personnel that it is suitable to try to drop Tua back, especially, you know, in light of what has happened to him physically in the past and what we saw happen to him in this last game. I don't really think this is a guy that you want taking 7-step drops and hanging back there for 5 seconds. And so, you know, I think that McDaniel has brilliantly done what, you know, this personnel is probably most capable of doing. And so you saw the team have a lot of regular season success with that last year. I mean, the statistics they put up, the points they scored, it was, you know, Ruthian. But the thing is, this league figures things out.
Yep.
And so we kind of saw, as last season came closer to an end, people were kind of catching on to it. And then naturally we saw the playoff loss against the Chiefs. And that's a matter of A, they're a great team. B, you know, like any other well-coached team, again, they will sort of study and learn a team's tendencies. And then C, obviously you factor in the conditions, the weather, the temperature there. So, you know, that was not going to be a suitable situation for them. But the bad news is, if you're in the AFC in the decade of 2020s, you're probably going to be facing a lot of Patrick Mahomes. The weather up there is never going to be nice in the postseason. Even a team like Cincinnati, who's a good team, if you had to go up there, the weather's not going to be good. So, you know, this team has to win. They have to win in the regular season, and they have to essentially end up locking down home field, because otherwise you're going to have to go to those places like Buffalo. None of them are very good from a climate standpoint, that's for sure.
It's funny how the narrative does a complete reversal. We're talking about Brett Sessa, the agent of the Stars here. A pleasure having him back on the program. After week 1, okay, we salvaged a victory. Dolphin fans were sort of contenting themselves or content with that. After week 2, went from Super Bowl and winning AFC East conversation to the offensive line, the geezers and Caesars. We never should have given him the money. It even got so absurd that yesterday, all over social media, as he was having a pretty good game and making some clutch catches, Mike Gesicki what was the cause of more concern for Dolphin fans. How do we ever let this guy go? And there's always conversation. And Lubie, not a big Chris Greer fan. I know you deal with him. And no backup quarterback, I guess, was the other observation people made, because the two backups, Thompson and White, were abysmal in the preseason when we saw them play. And you thought this is a suspect area. Are there too many holes on this team? And to what level is Chris Greer accountable? And if it doesn't work this year, I mean, is anybody ever going to be held accountable for the personnel decisions over the last many years?
Well, obviously, Chris Greer is the decision maker, and that's sort of where the buck stops. But, he has put together in certain areas a great roster. And then there's other areas where maybe it's not quite as great. And with the salary cap, unless you draft absolutely perfect, that's just kind of the way it works, because when you go out and you invest money in a guy like Odell Beckham from the outside, and then you go ahead and make such a massive long-term investment in a Tua Tagovailoa, as well as obviously all of the other big-name, big-time weapons that we have. And these are guys that certainly are all expected to be paid near or at the very top. There's just not enough money to go around. And so, this is why it's so important to have more hits than misses in the draft. And I think Chris Greer has added, certainly many great players. You see what an impact Jalen Phillips has had. Some of these other guys, even good role players that they've added, guys like Zach Sealer and, some of these other guys. So there's no such thing as a perfect roster. I mean, I think if you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, look at that receiving core. They don't have Tyreek Hill. They don't have Jalen Waddle. Hell, they barely even have Braxton Berrios. But yet they're still finding a way to win. And obviously, Patrick Mahomes is a big part of that. And not only is he a great player, but, he's been very durable, and he's available usually when they need him. And that's an important thing. I mean, they always say that the most important ability in the NFL is availability.
Yep.
And so, let's just hope the very best for Tua. Forget about his career. Let's just, wish him the very best for, his long-term health, for the sake of himself and his family. And the reality of the situation there is, I can't comment on what I think he should do. I would never comment on what a player who is not my client should do. But I will tell you this, I've been in certain situations over the years with different clients that have had different scares and concerns and long-term risks if they continue playing. And, if a situation ever got so bad where a doctor tells us, hey, you're lucky that you were able to walk away from this, and you've got a condition here which would make you susceptible to another spine type injury, which could ultimately put you in a wheelchair for life. That's when you sit them down and just say, hey, if you're thinking of continuing to play, you're going to have to do it with another agent, because there's just no way I can be a part of this. And, fortunately, in the very rare situations that's happened, the players made the correct decision, thankfully. In this instance, look, none of us are doctors. For all you know, this could be one of those things. How many times do we see injuries that don't look bad at all? I mean, you saw Aaron Rodgers walk off the field last year after 4 plays, and you're thinking, okay, it can't be that bad. And then an hour later, you find out it's a torn Achilles and the season's over. Well, this could be one of those things where, as gruesome as it looks, maybe, independent people who know more about this stuff than you, me, and every fan out there, maybe this is one of those things that just unfortunately looked terrible. But maybe it's possible that it just wasn't as bad as it looked, or that, enough time was given since the last ones. I don't know. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that I saw what everybody saw, which is a guy have a pretty disgusting, to watch response to what appeared to be a pretty pedestrian hit. This wasn't a case where defensive back comes, flying in helmet first,
see that water.
and it's a force meets force situation. I mean, this looked like a defensive back that was just kind of merely just there and just kind of in the way. And, it seemed like Tua was the one who initiated contact. And in fact, it looked to me like even at the very last second, Tua almost kind of backed off it. And it's just one of those deals where, every body is different. And so there might be one play where a guy makes a move and his ACL gets blown to bits. And there might be another player who can make that exact same move 100 times and his knee is fine. There's guys who have different knees, guys who have different backs, guys who have different necks and heads and brains. And so obviously we've seen that Tua is certainly susceptible to this type of injury. And, thankfully we didn't see it at all last season. So hopefully all that time sort of helped allow any type of damage that he had sustained the season before to maybe improve itself to where hopefully what we saw on Thursday is just something that with time can heal. And again, God willing, hopefully it's one of those deals where it looked like it was worse than it was. But yes, as somebody watching the game, just like anybody else out there, you certainly couldn't help but be concerned.
It's funny. I was watching the play where Pacheco had his ankle rolled up on, and I guess he's now going to be examined to see what his availability is going to be, the running back for the Chiefs. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, how are there not 3 torn ACLs on virtually every play? It's incredible. I don't know how these guys withstand it. It's amazing how much happens there when these guys get caught up at the bottom of a pile. Brent, always a pleasure, my friend. I hope your clients are faring well and that you're enjoying the season so far. And appreciate you coming on. I know we're going to do this on Monday, so thanks so much for being with us, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, guys. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you then.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. Brett Tesler, the agent of the stars. It's got to be a tough one, huh, Lubie? You're sitting with a guy now. That's an agent with some integrity, huh? Where you're thinking of James Woods in any given Sunday saying, "Go ahead and play," right?
Yeah, that's crazy to say. I'm not going to be your agent anymore if you want to keep playing. Like, that's nuts.
It's the old Muhammad Ali thing, right? For Eddie Pacheco to his grave would tell the story about how he begged him not to fight anymore, and then eventually just said, "Hey, I got to walk away from the corner. As much as I love you, I can't let you keep doing this." All right, Chris Perkins going to join us here, and look how handsome this guy is, and he's got the pool shot in the background, which was great. And thank you, Chris, for saving me on the Bury Your Bookie show, because I went the opposite way. I had Dolphins winning in the over. We're at least looking at salvation last Thursday night with the over, as it's 31-10 with 9 minutes to go in the fucking third quarter, Chris. And Tua goes down. I would imagine you have written much and discussed much about this. Where are we at? We just talked with Brett Tesler, and there's no way to know, but it sounds like, it seems like the direction of the conversation now is that Tua doesn't plan to retire, and he's just thinking about how he can come back.
Yeah, and you know what? That's kind of the way that I've been going the whole time. I didn't think that he would retire, but I've still said, the worst answer I can give on a radio show or a podcast, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, I don't know.
Well, I don't know how anybody could be expected to have, exemplary knowledge of this, because it's too vague of an issue to begin with.
Yeah, and and look, from Tua's standpoint, yes, you do have 2 kids and a family, but football is your identity. It's really, really hard to explain this to people because, and Lubie knows I met Mrs. Lubie at a party over the weekend.
Oh, yeah, good.
And I at this party, by the way, the look she gave me when she met me, and you're a sports writer, and just that look of disgust.
Yes.
That look, I know that look.
I got the same look. I was working with Lubie for years while he was with this woman, and
it was a true highlight of the weekend. I know that look of disgust, that look of, oh, not another one. But anyway, as far as Tua, I was trying to explain to some people at the party, this isn't about money, because a lot of people were like, well, he's got, 50 million or whatever. I just walk away. And I'm like, it's not that simple for these guys that, you look at your job and you think, yeah, I walk away easily for that much. This is their identity. This is even more than that. And so it's very hard to explain to people. So I figured that retiring is going to be Tua's last resort. I figure he'll probably be able to find a doctor or somebody who clears him. But still, it's too early to say whether Tua is going to come back this season, at what point he'll come back this season, and what is the likelihood that he'll sustain another concussion. It's just way, way too early in the process. But I would think that Tua does return, and because the NFL is all about money, I would think that the NFL does not have a problem with letting Tua return once and if he gets medical clearance.
So I know there's protocols, and as we know with Tua, they try to keep in the protocols as long as freaking possible. I haven't heard anything about him being put on an IR, which is at least 4 games. I haven't heard any. Has there been any discussion of that? I know McDaniel, very much like what you and Brett said, is about his health. We're worried about his health. He's a starter quarterback of his family. Okay, fine. But he was very adamant saying we're not even going near thinking retirement. Okay, so you're willing to say that much. Where are we then? Like, to me, if he comes back this season, I don't see how it's in less than 4 games, personally. And I get it. It's just an opinion. You cover the sport. You've been around the team. You were there 2 years ago. We talked with you a lot 2 years ago when that whole disaster was going on, where they kept getting it wrong, and then who knew what the hell was going on? What are the ideas being thrown out? Like, if he comes back this year, how early could it be? It's just hard. It's hard for me to fathom. He did the fucking finger thing again. As he's walking off, he's doing the finger thing. Like, it could be the easiest concussion ever. I've never seen them diagnose a concussion while the player's still on the goddamn ground. Like, they knew it was a concussion before any of the tests, before any of the questions. That's weird. Like, you're sort of admitting, yeah, it's pretty serious. And then now they're pulling back. Like, in your own estimation, if he was to return this year, how early could it be?
Again, don't know, Lubie. Andrew Peterson says, I think he's back in 2 weeks. Look, and
it could be, though. I'm thinking, too, short term.
I think, well, one thing that made diagnosing the concussion so easy was that fencing posture. And you talk about that. That's what that's a telltale sign. So I think that made it very easy to diagnose the concussion. And then he was just woozy. I mean, walking off the field, the guy was not stable. So, but, these things are funny, Lubie, because, again, if he gets medical clearance, he could be back in 3 weeks, or it might not be till December. We just don't know. And it gets into a lot of politics and perception, right? Because if 2 other quarterbacks sustain concussions in the next 2 weeks, then public sentiment is going to be like, ooh, this concussion thing. But say no quarterback sustains a concussion in the next 2 weeks, and Tua gets medical clearance, and you hear reports that he's upbeat around the facility, well, then maybe public sentiment backs off a little bit. And people are like, well, I don't really like this, but he seems fine. He's been cleared medically. It's his life. Let him play. So, again, the NFL is probably going to do what gets them the most money. I don't know what Tua is going to do. I think he's going to lean towards continuing to play. And I think the Dolphins would lean toward letting him continue to play, because that's their best chance to capitalize on what they built under Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Lubie, I could see him coming back. It would be hard for me to see him coming back before the bye, just because of his health, his history, and public sentiment. But at this point, I'm not going to rule it out. I would say that there's a very, very slim chance he's back before the bye. And off the top of my head, I think their bye is week 6.
Yeah, it's very early.
I think they play 5 games and then the bye. But I would have a hard time seeing him come back before the bye. But boy, I could definitely see him coming back this season.
That's what I was feeling. Not that I have any great insight into it. Obviously, I don't. But just seemed like from the look of it and all of the conversation that you've heard since, that probably going to give it another shot. I thought it might be sooner than later. You covered a lot of boxing, Chris, back in the day, and they could be in the corner, go, how many fingers do I have up, champ? After he got rocked a couple of times, and the guy be holding up one finger, and the champ would go 3, and you go, okay, you're good to go, man. That's the way that works. I keep thinking of James Woods any given Sunday, where he's going to play, no problem. Well, I think we'll see him out there, and I mean, if we're going to make a prediction on it, that makes perfect sense, right? Sit him out a couple of weeks, have the bye week, and boom, give him a shot to come back if he's back practicing again. All right, yesterday NFL, a wild day all the way around. I would have had a tendency to believe that New Orleans thing was a facade after they smoked the Carolina Panthers in week number 1.
Yeah.
They come right back and do it to the Dallas Cowboys, who never lose at home. They had won 16 straight at home. The Cowboys, as much as people like to see them lose, they weren't according them that pleasure on home games the last 2 years. Cowboys looked really good in week number 1, and New Orleans just takes it to them. I mean, literally drives them into submission in that game. Are the Saints to be all of a sudden regarded in another light? And could it be as simple as one of our good friends speculated as putting Kubiak in as offensive coordinator?
I'm not convinced on New Orleans after 2 weeks. I am the atypical football writer, football fan, where I'm not going to be thrilled after 2 weeks or 6 weeks. I still regard New Orleans as, maybe a playoff team. We'll see. I'm just not convinced. And look, as I keep saying, that the league has changed, right? Because now that you see that the veterans don't do a whole lot in preseason games, they get their work in the joint practices, and that's pretty much it. Even during training camp, the vets aren't getting a whole lot of work. Now, the Dolphins take that to an extreme, but that's been the league-wide trend the last few years, and as a result, these first 2 or 3 games are almost like preseason extended. It's kind of like, well, let's see what works. And everybody's in the same spot, right? It's not like, this team was tackling for 6 weeks, and so they're better tacklers. Everybody kind of backs off in training camp. So I really do think the first 2 and 3 weeks of the season, for maybe the previous 2 or 3 years and for the foreseeable future, that's going to be your real preseason. Now, that's not to say you're going to be playing draft picks in games 1, 2, and 3, but it's to say you're going to see with your veterans what really works. The stuff that 10 years ago you would have found out in that third preseason game. Remember the dress rehearsal where you're going to play into the third quarter.
Deal,
yeah, that's kind of what the first 2 or 3 weeks are now.
That was funny how much attention we used to put on that third preseason game. This is it. I did all of those hideous 4-hour pregame shows before preseason games, and you're sitting there. I probably had you on many times trying to fill like about 45 minutes. Hey, Chris, what about this third string backup long snapper? Yeah, I mean, that's one of Jason Cole's theories, that you're really looking at teams kind of putting things together, and yet I can't help but think that I keep hearing this number. I think it's 6% of teams that started out 0-2. Now, I mean, it's only recently, including the 17-game season, but 6% of teams that start out 0-2 make the playoffs, which seems absurd. Is it really that low? Is that possible?
Yeah, well, that's a 2-year sample size, right?
No, they've been going back like 5 years on this, but I guess it's the last 2 years included 17 games, which you would think it would not be as devastating a blow to lose the first 2 in a 17-game season. I mean, you still got 15 left. Lubie's got something for you, Perk, here.
Well, I was just going to bring back to the Dolphins because the Tua thing is in front of mind. It's what everyone's saying. But before he got hurt, they weren't playing well, including Tua. The defense was sort of okay. Look, if you look, really, most of the Bills' scores, except for one, came because defense was put in utterly ridiculous situations, and that was the same thing versus the Jags. So the defense actually wasn't horrendous as people may think. The defense sort of was okay. The offense has been a total mess, just a total mess. I keep bringing it back to this man, and look, he's fun, he's different, he's young, he's now embracing the Miami culture. When you look at his look now compared to the way he looked 3 years ago, and I get it, he doesn't pick the players, but all I've ever heard is that he has involvement in the picking of the players. He's the one that supposedly, with the wonderful Chris Greer, was happy about this offensive line. He's the one that believed in this offensive line, which I still don't understand how any human being could say that out loud and not be laughed out of the goddamn room they said that in before the season, let alone now. What do you put on Mike McDaniel through 1 3/4 games? Because again, once Tua got hurt, all hell broke loose. But before Tua got hurt versus a Bills team that lost a ton of players in the offseason and had injuries on top of that, the defense was snuffing you out. I get it's early, but it looks very similar to the last 2 years when things go tough for the Dolphins. They have nowhere to go. They're not great at grinding out drives. Where are you with Mike McDaniel? What blame are you putting on Mike McDaniel? Honestly, that's it. Where are you with Mike McDaniel at this point, 2 seasons and 2 games in?
I'm the same point where I've always been with Mike McDaniel. Show me something. Like, I haven't seen anything. And that's kind of what I'm writing today. But look, I've pounded this topic, and Dolphins fans, screw you, Perk. You don't know what you're talking about, Perk. Look how many points we scored, Perk. And it's always, dude, this offense does nothing against good teams. Zero. Zip. They just wimp out. And look, as they only allowed 20 points against Jacksonville. 17 points. I'm sorry. And you needed this last second field goal to win. Like that's unacceptable. That's what this offense repeatedly does. And Mike McDaniel does pick the majority of these players. Chris Greer did. He agreed with Joe Philbin. He agreed with Adam Gase. I can't say he agreed with Flo because that was the tank. That was kind of a tank job for a lot of that. But Chris Greer does not have an overarching philosophy of we're going to be a strong defensive team and we're gonna get players to that extent. Well, what does my head coach say? Okay, that's what we're going with, and that's what we see here with Mike McDaniel. And it's very much a one-dimensional offense. And I hammered on this point just how they were 1-6 against playoff teams last year, 10-1 against non-playoff teams, and 8-0 last year when Tyreek got 100 or more yards, 2-7 when he didn't. 0-1 this year when Tyreek doesn't get 100 yards, 1-0 when he does. You're in the same spot. It's the same offense. And here's the other dimension of this, Lubie. We're going to see right now, what about player development, right, with Skylar Thompson? And what about, is this a quarterback-friendly offense or a Tua-friendly offense? You have this big competition throughout training camp between Skylar and Mike White. We're putting them in difficult situations. Okay, here's a difficult situation. Let's see what happened. Let's see what you learned. Let's see if you made the right choice. This is a huge referendum on Mike McDaniel and the whole system that he's brought in here. Great question, Lubie, because that, to me, that's kind of what this boils down to was this whole thing built on one player and kind of this almost, I don't want to say a gimmick, but getting the ball out quickly and getting the ball to Tyreek. Like, can you win with your defense, with your run game, with your edge rushers, or could you only win one way, beating inferior teams?
Boy, I can't even begin to quantify my frustration. When Skylar Thompson came in, as I said, I had an investment in the over in this game. It's 31-10. You're on the 6-yard line, for Christ's sake, maybe even inside of that.
Yep. And
you're thinking, okay, I mean, you need to score here. You need a touchdown. And he runs the ball twice with primitive dives into the middle of the line. Then has Thompson throw a pass into the corner that goes into the stands. And then finally the guy gets sacked. And you're like, what the fuck? I mean, if you're going to bring a guy in, if he's competent at all, let him do something. Those 2 runs into the middle of the line of scrimmage, I literally, thank goodness the razor blades were hidden because I was ready to. You can't have that little faith in the guy that you're bringing into the ball game. And when it's already a lost cause, what do you have to lose by letting the guy do something? I mean, at least letting him fling the ball down the field or into the end zone a couple of times. Even if he gets picked off, you're going to lose anyway.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll say this, that, I do think, and I'll get ripped for this, yes. I do think that the Dolphins' path to the playoffs remains the same. Because, look, last year you got there over the bodies of non-playoff teams. It wasn't like you were winning tough games and now, oh, my God, you were 10-1 against non-playoff teams. You had 11 victories. That's how you get to the playoffs under Mike McDaniel. You're 3-12 against playoff teams under Mike McDaniel, but you've made 2 playoff appearances. It's because you beat these inferior teams. Now let's see if you can do that. If you continue doing the same thing. Now, granted, you're not going to beat them with the 80-yard Tua to Tyreek play like you did against Jacksonville. This is why you've got to find another way. Can you operate the offense relying on the run game and tight ends? I mean, look, let's be honest here. The thing that Skyler has to do is the same thing that Tua did, right? Get the ball to Tyreek, get the ball to Waddle. That's what we're looking at. If we boil this offense down to its essence, you get the ball to Tyreek, you get the ball to Jalen Waddle, and you beat the non-playoff teams. And that's how you're going to get to the playoffs. So the path to the playoffs remains the same, but without Tua, obviously the degree of difficulty is up like 20 times what it was previously.
Yeah, Lubie, you wanted to embellish this thing.
So we talked to you about it before the season, and I know why your answer was what it was, because in the line of things, the line is an issue. They lost on the defensive line. The linebacker core is an issue. They needed a big receiver. They brought in a guy who probably is going to miss most of the year as their third guy in OBJ. They brought in tight ends, but are the tight? So there is a long line of issues with the Miami Dolphins. But we asked you like 2 weeks before the season, after we saw an entire preseason of fucking Skylar Thompson and garbage Mike White. What are they doing at quarterback? And you're like, look, there's so much other things in front of that they're not even focusing on that. And that's clear that they weren't focusing on that. Are they now? I mean, look, you obviously need someone to back up Thompson. But, and I get it, there's not a big market of Pro Bowl quarterbacks available, but Tannehill's there. Russell Wilson is not getting any playing time with the Steelers.
Well, he's been injured.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
Even if he was healthy, he's not going to be playing with Fields there. Like, he's not going to have it being a backup. Are there any talk of what could they go and get? Because I mean, what we've seen with Thompson outside of that run year one is he's not an NFL quarterback. Anyone who outside of Mike McDaniel that I've talked to in and outside of sports, the NFL believes that. Have you heard anything? Have you any talk of them going getting someone else? And if so, who are some of the options they possibly could bring in as a stopgap until Tua possibly comes back?
I haven't heard any names, but they are going out there to get somebody else. That's what Mike McDaniel told us. But look, Lubie, and here again would be the total failure and breakdown of the entire system. You rewarded an injury-prone quarterback with a contract extension. Again, you have this big offseason competition between Skylar Thompson and Mike White. And now you're telling me that neither of them was good enough? Like, what were you doing this entire offseason? Like, I'm seriously, like, how could you mess this up this badly? Like, you had a whole offseason to get another quarterback, and you chose not to. And now here you are, and you're looking at two guys with Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle, and you're saying that neither is adequate? This is a failure by coaching. This is a failure by management. This is not on Skylar. And like, how do you emerge from preseason with a backup that's not NFL caliber? And you're starting an injury-prone quarterback. Like, Joe Philbin wouldn't do this. Like Dennis Hickey, Jeff Ireland, like Randy, none of them would do this.
Well, you were dredging up the ghosts of the past. That's
wrong.
great.
Dude, I just can't understand. Like, I mean, come on, let's get the circus music playing while we do this segment. Like, come on, this can't be possible. You've got to be able to do something with Skylar Thompson. You do, otherwise. You might as well get Greer and McDaniel out of here right now. That would be a total failure on their part. Total failure.
Those first two handoffs, Chris. Stop reminding me. I mean, literally, I almost broke my television set. I'm just like, are they really going to do this here? I need one fucking score to get within 1 point. Keep the scoreboard pressure on the Bills, so at least kick a field goal somewhere in the next quarter and a half. And I can't get it done. So that's the lament of a degenerate. All interesting points. I mean, if the Dolphins are 2-0 and Tua doesn't get hurt, are we having this conversation? Maybe not. But all of these flies were so-called in the ointment to begin with. And unfortunately, one thing, it's kind of like one of those Rube Goldberg things where, you throw the ball and it hits the dominoes and everything, falls into place. a series of unfortunate negatives. All were triggered by this Tua injury and the loss, and now the team seems to be more in a state of disarray and a subject of being harpooned instead of being praised for putting together this marvelous roster. All right, who looks good to you then so far, Chris Perkins, in the National Football League, based on what you saw yesterday? I mean, the Saints, I think, scored on every drive that they had, every single possession. That's amazing. Derek Carr, I mean, you could say the word much maligned or the words much maligned apply to him. I don't know. All of a sudden, a resurrection, and he looks great. You're talking about Allen. I mean, remember when the Raiders left him in England and just said, "You're not even getting on the team plane. You're so bad."
Right.
And Saints fans were complaining that this guy wasn't a real coach all throughout last year. He suddenly wakes up. Who's impressed you so far? I mean, the Chiefs 2-0 was very shaky, very speculative. I mean, easily or suspect that they could have easily lost both of those games. What do you think? I mean, who's really the cream of the crop? 49ers look great first week. They lose the second week. What are we looking at here in the league?
Yeah, I think. Look, you still got to like Kansas City. They beat a quality team yesterday, Cincinnati, with some bonehead errors. I still like Cincinnati. I know they're they always start bad, right? I mean,
yeah.
So I still do like them. Their big thing is keeping Joe Burrow healthy, but they'll be there at the end. Baltimore, I think Defo, I might have told you to take Baltimore in the survivor pool, and here's the thing about Baltimore, and I hammered on this last year, and people, screw you, Perk, you're an idiot, Perk, which that might be true, but this team can blow a late game lead at home like no other good team in the history of the NFL, and we saw it again yesterday.
Wow.
One team that I do like, Defo, is the team that beat them, is the Raiders. And the reason being was because after last season, you remember they came in here and they lost 20-13 to the Dolphins at Hard Rock, and if not for Jalen Ramsey with I think that was the game he had 2 incredible interceptions, and the last one that saves the game. But I had probably 5 or 6 Dolphins players tell me the following week in the locker room, we're just talking, blah blah blah, and I'm so impressed by the Raiders. They played as such a team. They were so together. So the Raiders are kind of one of my dark horse teams to look for. But look, New Orleans looks good. I just don't believe in them yet. I still like Detroit. I still like San Francisco. And look, I'm still gonna kind of believe in Buffalo because of Josh Allen. So I would say the Raiders are like my underdog right now. New Orleans, you've got to watch them because of what they've done. I don't believe in them, and then the rest is the chalk for me at this point.
Don't ever read anything by any handicappers if you want to make a pick too. I got sucker punched on that Ravens Raiders game. Changed my pick from Houston, which I would have survived on that show that we did on Barrier Bookie. And I kept having this stat pop up in my head that the Raiders were just abysmal against the run in week number 1. That they gave up an incredible amount of yardage, and that the Ravens were really going to be able to capitalize on this. And if they could run the ball, well, God forbid, then they unleash the real Lamar Jackson, scrambling to the outside and firing the ball down the field. And it was horrible. I was watching, I mentioned this earlier, I'm watching it on the Red Zone, and they keep coming. Every time they come back to this game, either Derek Carr is throwing some miraculous 4th down completion, or you had Lamar Jackson standing straight back in the pocket like you were alluding to with Tua, and just getting annihilated. I mean, bulldozed over like he was, in a commercial with Mayhem. I mean, just flattened into the turf. And they end up losing, giving up a 10-point lead that they held twice in the 4th quarter in that game.
Right.
Unbelievable. So, we got knocked out of there. And as I was saying, I'm canceling my audition to Naked and Afraid after getting knocked out in week 2 of the Survivor Pool. Chris, we love you, man. Seattle this week, coming up for the Miami Dolphins. Now you're venturing out there?
I am.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Do
you go to the fish market? I mean, what do you do when you go out there?
Yeah. This will probably be like my, I don't know, 10th or 12th time out to Seattle because, I covering the NBA. So never missed that trip when I covered the NBA.
Watching
So,
the
yeah,
glove?
I'll probably stay down there around Pike's Place Market.
Have you ever seen him throw the fish? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Oh, you have? Yeah.
Yep.
And
So,
did you ever try to make a reception?
Great city.
You like it? Okay. All right, good.
Yeah, I love it up there. I love the Portland is just like 3 hours to the south, although I'm not going to get there. And then what's the Canadian city that's 3 hours to the north?
Vancouver.
Is Vancouver
right up there. I've never been to Vancouver, but I hear it's beautiful and a great city. But Seattle, I got zero problems with Seattle. Love Seattle.
Nice, enjoy.
You have to go actually to the casino to make your bets there. So I know that from. That's usually where I ventured, and never mind the scenery in Vancouver. I wanted to know where was the nearest Native American casino, and that's what I would find on the road. And good, you're still on the Sun-Sentinel expense account, which is great. If it was Lubie and if it was me, we'd be paying our own way. So enjoy the trip. All right, Chris, thanks. Always a pleasure, my friend. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, Chris Perkins, ladies and gentlemen. We have to run. That was a lot of Dolphin talk for a team that didn't play. Lubie, what do you think?
Well, we didn't get to talk about them Friday. We did our Degenerate Friday.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. Very strange. I mean, you talk about a 180 in the so-called narrative, which is not a term I really warmly embrace, but for lack of a better one, I mean, the conversation, if you want to use another one of these now new lame cliches about speculating about teams, it changed 180 degrees, did it not?
Yep.
I was sucked into being optimistic. I thought, I don't know if it's just from years and years of the same old shit.
I was very
Miami Dolphins, but I wanted to be optimistic this year. And without Tua in there, I mean, I don't even know it's fair to make a judgment. It's just, I'm not sure that they would have had somebody that has his same so-called skill set, as limited as it may be in some ways. It is exactly the thing that, I mean, it's kind of like having Steve Nash at point guard, right?
Yes.
Where, okay, this guy can do this really well, and maybe some other things he's not as good at, but what the fuck?
Yes.
It's going to be a positive influence on your team if you design the offense correctly, and seemed like McDaniel had. But one of the other big criticisms of that game, and I didn't watch all of it, but was the fact that Waddle and Tyreek Hill were not on the field on a couple of key plays. That both of them were out of the lineup. And you're thinking, why would you have these like first and second year guys out there at the receiver position and tight end when you're paying these guys like $300 million to be your stars? So always in hindsight, it's always easy to post-race handicap, Lubie. All right, we'll see you guys 1 o'clock, Mike Mayo's Lunchbox here on South Florida Live, and we will catch you tomorrow with another edition of the Defo Show. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time as we leave you know that.
The time.
9:04.
Let's go to eat a damn snack.
Look what they done to my soul.